This next panel is Binational Collaboration, understanding that the border does not divide us, but rather unites us. This panel will focus on binational, collaborative, and transformational projects along the U.S.-Mexico border. These projects can only be completed by working on both sides together to have a greater impact on the quality of life of border residents on both sides. Topics on this panel will include the relationship between IBWC and CILA, Laredo-Nuevo Laredo Binational Park, and San Diego-Tijuana mobility. I'd like to now take an opportunity to introduce Salvador Lopez, the bank's Chief Environmental Officer, where he's responsible for overseeing the environmental integrity of the operations of the bank and the projects being considered for certification and financing. Salvador has more than 20 years of professional experience in environmental, water, and other sustainability issues, including significant experience in the U.S.-Mexico border region. Prior to joining NADBank, he served as a country representative for Mexico and Peru at the Global Green Growth Institute, an international organization that supports member countries in their transition to a green economy model. Salvador will introduce both commissioners. Thank you very much. Salvador.
Thank you, Jesse. Good morning, everyone, again, and let me thank you again for being here at our 26th Border Environmental Forum. It is a pleasure for me to introduce our next panelist. First, my good friend, Dr. Maria Elena Giner, who was appointed by President Biden in August 2021 to serve as the United States Commissioner of the International Boundary and Water Commission U.S. Section, or IBWC. Previously, Maria Elena served as General Manager of the Border Environment Corporation Commission, a sister institution of the NADBank, which has been fully merged with us since 2017. Dr. Giner holds a Bachelor's of Science in Civil Engineering from Loyola Marymount University, a Master's in Business Administration from UT El Paso, and a doctorate in Public Policy from the University of Texas in Austin. Thank you, Maria Elena, for being here. My paisana, Ingeniera Adriana Reséndez Maldonado, was also appointed as commissioner of the Mexican section just a month later in September of 2021. And for simplicity, I would refer to the Mexican section as CILA, as it is commonly known in Spanish. Previously to becoming the CILA commissioner, Commissioner Reséndez worked for 23 years within CILA in different positions, including as Deputy Director for the Colorado River and as Principal Engineer of Operations. Commissioner Reséndez is a civil engineer with a master's degree from the Universidad Autónoma de Chihuahua, La UACH. Thank you for being here, Diana. So we've all know about some of the challenges we face in the border region when it comes to water resources and sharing a scarce water resource and adapting to climate change, and we'll be hearing more about that. But what I find encouraging in preparing for this meeting is to remember that the commission was created over 130 years ago, back in 1889, precisely to address some of these issues. Obviously, back then we didn't know about certain things, but we, as countries, we had the vision to create the institution. And it was also over 100 years ago in 1906 that what I believe was the first convention on the allocation of the distribution of the waters of the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo was signed. And then in 1944, which is almost 80 years ago, when the water treaty to allocate the resources of the Colorado, Tijuana, and Rio Grande was ratified by both countries. So there's quite a bit of history of cooperation. And in addition to cooperating on paper, if you will, the commissions, both sides of the commission, are responsible for applying the treaties, but also for operating and maintaining infrastructure related to flood control and levees, storage, reservoirs, diversion dams, and of course, wastewater treatment plant facilities. So it's a pleasure to have both of you today to talk about what your institutions are doing to continue and improve this binational cooperation, again, in the face of new challenges related to climate change and drought, and of course, a very dynamic and growing border region. So with that, what we will do is we'll have about 15 minutes of a presentation, and then we'll leave some space for questions and answers. So I believe you go first. Is that correct? If you can, and we have a PowerPoint.
Buenos días a todos. Muchas gracias por la invitación. Muchas gracias, Salvador, comisionada. A todos, muy buenos días. Son varios los temas que están bajo la jurisdicción de la Comisión que le asignan los tratados internacionales, pero hay un gran tema que es ahorita el gran reto, que es la sequía. Es el tema de la sequía, no solamente en el río Colorado, sino en el río Bravo. Y los dos en el mismo momento. Estamos viviendo un momento muy crítico, como lo comentaba el embajador, estamos viviendo 23 años, tenemos ya 23 años de sequía en la cuenca del río Colorado. La sequía más intensa en 114 años y una de las peores de 1200 años. Pero quiero compartirles a ustedes cómo llegamos a la cooperación binacional. Apenas en la década de los 90 del siglo pasado, estábamos buscando cómo ver la cuenca del río Colorado de una forma integral. En ese entonces Estados Unidos era una cuenca, México tenía su asignación y hasta allí. Pero buscábamos, decíamos, hay muchos componentes en Estados Unidos y en México que se entrelazan. Las acciones en Estados Unidos tienen un impacto en México. Y buscamos eso. Fue hasta 2010, con la firma del Acta 317, que se llama Marco Conceptual para las Conversaciones México-Estados Unidos, que empezamos a hablar de esta cooperación. 2 años después, en 2012, se firmó el Acta 319. En esta acta se estableció por primera vez cómo México y Estados Unidos íbamos a compartir un recorte. Cómo íbamos, si bien es cierto que el Tratado de Aguas de 1944 establece cómo repartir, que debe ser de forma proporcional las reducciones en México, fue hasta el Acta 319 donde se estableció esto. Además, se estableció una inversión estadounidense de $21 millones para proyectos de conservación en México. Durante la implementación del Acta 319, observamos que estos recortes que se habían establecido en el acta podían no ser suficientes. Podrían no ser suficientes para atender la sequía tan extrema que se estaba viviendo y tan prolongada. Fue por esto que el Acta 323 estableció no solamente recortes, sino un plan binacional de contingencia ante la escasez de agua. Me ponen la siguiente, por favor. Estos son los números finales después de muchos estudios, después de muchos análisis que se definieron de cómo nos íbamos a recortar, cuándo nos íbamos, qué volúmenes íbamos a ahorrar. El recorte es un volumen que ya no, se deja de recibir y ya no se vuelve a recibir. Los ahorros voluntarios son unos ahorros que se hacen y que cuando las presas estén en un nivel de operación más alto se pueden recuperar. Para comentarles, el primer año desde la firma del tratado en 1944 que se aplicaron recortes fue este año, en 2022. Y se aplicó el primer nivel de recorte, la primer rayita que ven por allí. En este año, en 2023, se va a aplicar un segundo nivel de recorte. Estamos ya viviendo una condición muy crítica, muy rápida, que a pesar de todos los esfuerzos que se hicieron y que se están haciendo en la cuenca para almacenar agua, para estabilizar los niveles, tenemos una condición muy crítica de esfuerzo. La que sigue, por favor. Esto lo comentaba también el embajador Salazar, cómo podemos ver los almacenamientos en el lago Mida al principio de la sequía 2020. Esto nos ayudó mucho porque son unos reservorios muy grandes, con una capacidad muy grande, que reguló estos 23 años de sequía. Sin embargo, llegamos ya a un momento en que estos almacenamientos están en caída, están disminuyendo de una forma muy drástica, muy rápida. Se están cumpliendo muchos pronósticos de cómo se va a comportar la cuenca. La que sigue. Estos son los resultados del estudio de 24 meses del mes de agosto, donde muestra cuáles son los niveles de operación en los que vamos a estar. Esto es en la presa Hoover. Allí se determina el siguiente nivel de escasez, el que sigue. Estas es las elevaciones en la presa Glen Canyon, la que sigue. Ok, estos son los resultados de los estudios y de las modelaciones que se están haciendo en Estados Unidos. Estos los está haciendo el Buró de Reclamación y nos muestra, por ejemplo, lo que estamos viendo aquí son los pronósticos en el lago Powell, como hay un pronóstico máximo, uno el más probable y el pronóstico mínimo. Son todas estas las trazas que están mostrando los modelos, y si se fijan hay unas rayas, hay unas líneas muy por debajo del pronóstico mínimo, ¿verdad? Entonces, estos pronósticos también se pueden presentar. La que sigue. Estos son los pronósticos de elevación en el lago Mead. ¿Qué estamos haciendo? ¿Qué se está haciendo? Bueno, Estados Unidos está realizando medidas de conservación en la cuenca para proteger los niveles en el lago Mead y México se está sumando a estos esfuerzos. El Acta 323 establece inversiones estadounidenses por 31 millones de dólares para proyectos de conservación de agua en México que beneficien al sistema, que beneficien al medio ambiente y que sea en beneficio de los usuarios de ambos países. Para atender este tema, la Comisión Internacional de Límites y Aguas ha formado un grupo de medidas proactivas. Este grupo de medidas proactivas tiene la función de identificar acciones conjuntas adicionales a las que están en el Acta 323. Tenemos que buscar cómo estabilizar esta cuenca antes de llegar a una crisis. Se habla de que si se llega a unos niveles en los que ya pueda no ser posible entregar agua a los usuarios de la cuenca baja. Y tenemos que sumarnos a los esfuerzos como países para cooperar y lograr esta estabilidad. ¿Qué vamos a hacer o qué estamos haciendo? Los próximos meses estaremos acelerando los esfuerzos para nuestro proceso. Necesitamos identificar, diseñar e implementar los proyectos de conservación, evaluar las condiciones de la cuenca, continuar con el monitoreo, continuar con las acciones y buscaremos de forma conjunta esta cooperación binacional. Esto es lo que yo quería comentarles de la cuenca del río Colorado.
Muchas gracias. Muchas gracias, comisionada Reséndez. Invitaré a la comisionada Giner a darnos sus palabras, por favor.
Thank you for the invitation. Good morning, everyone. The way we divided up this presentation is because Commissioner Reséndez has worked on Rio Colorado for 20 years. Now we're going to rewind back in time 20 years because this is happening now in Texas. And we don't have the tools to do what the Colorado River is being done. And her expertise is fundamental in this. So if we could go to the first slide. So just as a reminder, we've actually got two treaties on the Rio Grande. One is the El Paso Juarez Convention of 1906, and the second is the 1944 Water Treaty. The 1944 Water Treaty is from the region of Fort Quitman all the way down to Brownsville. And it also includes the Rio Colorado, which my colleague, Commissioner Reséndez, spoke about. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, so the Convention of 1906, that region between Elephant Butte in the Las Cruces area, or just north of Las Cruces, all the way down to El Paso is at a drought stage. And for the first time, Mexico is only receiving 25% of the commitment from the United States to Mexico, which is 60,000 acre feet, is usually what they should be receiving according to the treaty. But the treaty allows for reductions in water based on elevations and elephant butte and availability of the natural flow. So the area of southern New Mexico, El Paso, and Juarez are receiving reduced amounts of water that they would have normally been able to receive. So we go to the next slide. And you can see here the red line is where we should be, are the deliveries from the United States to Mexico on the Colorado. And as you can see in the last 20 years, since about 2000, we haven't met that obligation. Some have been higher, but a lot of them have been lower. Okay, can we go to the next slide? So that's the upper Rio Grande. This one, I like to use the quote by Mark Twain: "Whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting," right? Because that's what we have here. What we have here in the 1944 water treaty is the red line. 70% of the water in the Rio Grande comes from Mexico. And unlike the Rio Colorado or the Colorado River, where the United States delivers to Mexico 1.5 million acre feet, Mexico under treaty has 5 years to deliver 1.75 million acre feet. And the treaty says it should be on average 350,000 per year. But it could be 0.000, 1.75, you divide by 5, and that's an average of 350,000. Unfortunately, the 1944 water treaty did not have a lot of details with regards to how to handle drought. So what you have here is 10 water cycles. On the left are all of these water cycles that ended early, because as soon as there's rain, as soon as there's a hurricane, the reservoirs fill and the cycle ends, and Mexico has met its obligation. But on the right, you have another 5 cycles where Mexico has ended in debt or has been able to settle its debt right at the last year. We are right now at year 2 of the water cycle, and that's the black line on the bottom. Thus far, Mexico, because of the dry conditions, has been able to deliver only 13% of what we would like to be delivered on an annual basis to date. And so what's happening? What does this mean? So let's go to the next slide. Okay, there's a lot of numbers and there's a lot of squares here. And unlike Ambassador Salazar, I'm not going to get down and go point and make everybody write notes and all of that. But this is what I want to show. On the upper left, coming down, that's the Sierra Madre. And we've got the largest dam that comes from the Sierra Madre. So if there's drought on the Colorado, there's pretty good chance there's going to be drought on the Sierra Madre, right? So there's a series of dams on the Rio Conchos, and that comes in Presidio and is for the Rio Grande. And the largest dam, which is La Boquilla, which is kind of in the middle right now, is at 25% capacity. All of the farmers there in that region that rely on that dam have been cut about 40% in their allocations, okay? As we go further down the river, we see Amistad Dam. The IBWC, the two governments, own 2 of the largest dams in the country. Amistad Dam is ranked 11th, and Falcon Dam is ranked 29th in conservation capacity. And as you can see, Amistad Dam is the little blue triangle, and Falcon is further down. Amistad Dam right now is at 25% capacity. It actually went down to 23, but because of the recent rains that we've had, we've been able to get additional water in there. And Falcon right now is at 13%. It actually went down to 11, okay? And so given the fact that we have these low water levels there is very telling. If you look further south, the next large dam is the Marty Gomez, which is what supplies to Monterrey. And that is at 27%. And as you know, water shortages have been experienced in Monterrey. And down there in the South Texas area, Tamaulipas is going on its third year of zero water allocation to its agriculture. Okay, so this is the crisis that's coming along. We talked about the crisis on the Rio Colorado. Because of that crisis and because of the recognition that the Western states, the lobbying power of 7 U.S. states for Congress, bipartisan, from Wyoming all the way down to Mexico, that is 40 million people that Rio Colorado serves. They were able to secure $4 billion in the last 2 bills for stabilizing the Rio Colorado. And the IBWC under the Rio Grande, Rio Bravo, doesn't even have any resources, programmatic resources to stabilize the system. Okay? And I highlight this because of the inequities that head of the IBWC, feel that we have as an agency compared to the big dogs of Department of Interior, Bureau of Reclamation. Whenever there's money sloshing around, everybody thinks of the Corps and they think of the Bureau of Reclamation and Department of Interior. And the IBWC, the 2 sections, we are the Bureau of Reclamation and the Department of Interior on the Rio Grande, and we're trying to change that narrative. We are sounding the alarm on the issues that are going on right now on the Rio Grande. So given that fact, we're not going to sit here, as we say, con los brazos cruzados, right? We're working on something. And Ambassador Montezuma mentioned that. If we can go to the next slide. Oh, this is the other slide. So I talked a little bit about our combined storage at Amistad and Falcon. Well, as you can see, since, I can't read that year, I'm sorry. What is the 68, thank you. 1968, that is the combined storage of the 2. These were filled like in the 50s, okay? And as you can see, in 2022, the combined storage of Falcon and Amistad are at its lowest levels. And there are plenty of utilities that take water from these lakes that their intake no longer can reach into the lake because of the shrinkage of the lake. Their intakes aren't deep enough into the lake. So with some ingenuity, we were able to identify some equipment, and we were able to get that equipment from Department of Interior because they're like our rich cousins, right? We go to them when we need help. And we asked, and they donated to us an amphibious dredger so that we can go into the lake and actually dredge around the intakes of these utilities so that they can have access to water. So if we go to the next one. So what are we doing? Well, right now we have done a series of about 40 interviews with important stakeholders, because Commissioner Resendez and Ambassador Montezuma mentioned what's being done on the Colorado River. There is actually investment from the 5 states and the Bureau of Reclamation in conservation efforts, in agriculture, in Mexicali, so that water can be left up in Lake Mead. And those investments allowed to raise the level of Lake Mead by 2 feet, which prevented going down in water shortages, because on the Colorado, the diagnosis or the projections are based on whatever the levels are in the dam. On the Rio Grande, there's no science. There is no science. You saw the projections that are being done on the reclamation. There is no science on the Rio Grande, because that's not the way these 2 institutions have been set up to date. But I'm going to change that. I'm hoping to change that, right? I'm hoping to create, thank you. I'm hoping to create, with my small $50 million year budget, which we're hoping to change, an actual climate science area that will be based on what we're doing here. A white paper on what are new sources of water, creating new sources of water, and we're hoping to have this white paper that will bring forth ideas on operations that can be done to create more water in the river, conservation efforts that can be done on both sides to stabilize the system, just like the Colorado River is being done with the $4 billion that it receives. And I keep harping on that because I think all of us as stakeholders, yes, somebody told me I need to be the spear, but I also need the support of all of our stakeholders because it affects all of you, okay? And if we can go to the next one, I think that's my last slide, because I don't think we're going to be able to talk about sanitation because we have sanitation issues as well. For those of you who do not know, we also manage 500 miles of levees, 2 international wastewater treatment plants, and 5 ports of entry. That's also part of the infrastructure that we manage. But I want to end with this quote, because I remind myself this of John Kennedy. He said, anyone who can solve the problem of water will be worthy of 2 Nobel Prizes, one for science and one for peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. We don't have much time. I'll just make a quick comment. We would be remiss if we don't talk about water quality, which you barely touch upon it. We need another conference for that. But I think in this day of age, quality equals quantity. So we hear a lot about quantity, but if we don't take care of the quality side, then the quantity will not be there. And before I leave, you wanted to say something, Commissioner?
Sí, solamente agregar y complementar lo que comenta la comisionada sobre los esfuerzos en el Río Bravo. Estamos buscando como México, como gobierno, qué podemos hacer en el Río Bravo, qué proyectos de infraestructura podemos implementar para conservar agua, para tener un mejor sistema, ¿no? Creo que es algo que estamos buscando conjuntamente. Y sobre el tema del saneamiento y de calidad del agua, comentarles que, bueno, también es una de las tareas que hace la comisión, el monitoreo de la calidad del agua, y buscamos soluciones al problema de saneamiento. Gracias.
Muchísimas gracias nuevamente a las dos. Gracias a ustedes por escucharnos.
Next, I would like to call Deputy Managing Director John Beckham, Mayor Sines, y Alcaldesa Canturrosas. John Beckham was appointed as the Deputy Managing Director in 2020. He is responsible for the day-to-day operations of NADBank, including general staff management, assist in the development and implementation of environmental infrastructure projects and programs, contact with the U.S. and Mexican NADBank board members, as well as financial and budgetary oversight, performance measures, and collaboration with stakeholders. Prior to joining NADBank, he worked at the Inter-American Investment Corporation for 19 years, and he has worked in international finance and development since 1991. Please join me in welcoming the panel.
Thank you. Muchas gracias a todos y gracias, Jesse, por esa introducción. Es un gusto estar aquí. It's a great pleasure to be here. And as my colleague and friend Calixto said, I'll stick to English just to make it a little easier for some translation, but panelists should express themselves in the language and I'll say the vocabulary because I can handle salty speak, but that they feel comfortable. It's a pleasure to host this panel. I first met both mayors in December of 21 at a forum for binational metropolitan cooperation at Nuevo Laredo. And since then, we've been working together on several projects to invest and improve the environment and quality of life for citizens of both Laredos. Through one of these projects, which we're going to hear about I'm sure in their remarks, I met Rick, who has impressed me with his work and his firm's work on vision and the vision for sustainability on the border region. I think one of the key elements when we were putting this agenda together was the importance of seeing the interconnectedness between national policy and the binational relationship at its many levels. And this panel, I think, is going to be extraordinarily interesting for those of us who are really interested or concerned about where the rubber hits the road, so to speak, or where the water is actually consumed, used, and lived with. And these mayors and this architect have some innovative ideas on how to bring their communities together, how to create a deeper relationship that already exists, and how to address some environmental needs that will create a more prosperous future for ourselves and our children. So with that, I'm going to just briefly introduce each of them, and then I'll let them speak. Carmen Lilia Canturrosa, and I can roll my R's unlike Ambassador Salazar. despite my last name being different. She's president of the municipality of Nuevo Laredo, and she was elected and assumed functions in 2021, and she was inaugurated in the 1st of October of 2021. Prior to that, she had various public offices on the border state of Tamaulipas, which included being a council member for the city of Nuevo Laredo, and she also was a congressperson in the State Congress of Tamaulipas from 2018 to 2021. And she's trained as a licenciada de abogada in la Universidad de Valle de Bravo, one of my favorite places in Mexico. And she's here to share her experiences and field questions on what they see on the, well, that's actually, I'm cheating my remarks. To her left is Pete Saenz. He's an American attorney and politician serving the mayor of Laredo. He's worked at the Laredo Community College. He assumed, prior to assuming the mayor, when he was elected in 2014 and assumed that position on November 12th. He was educated at the Texas A&M University in Kingville and has a law degree from St. Mary's University. Lastly, I have Rick Archer. He's CEO of Overland Partners in Architecture and Urban Design. He's the founding partner of the firm, and he's a fellow of the American Institute of Architects. They've been locally and internationally recognized for their work in design and sustainability. And he's an active leader in community initiatives around the globe with a focus on education, sustainability, social equity, and design. So please give us a warm welcome to all panelists here. And Carmen Ilia, we'll start with you.
Buenos días, muchísimas gracias por la invitación, muchísimas gracias a todos los presentes. Pues aquí estamos los dos Laredos, la región de los dos Laredos, con mucho entusiasmo para compartirles un poco del trabajo que hemos venido realizando como región de los dos Laredos, que estamos conscientes que para fortalecernos tenemos que vernos como una zona metropolitana binacional y desde que tomé protesta en el mes de octubre, que tengo 10 meses de alcalde, pues he tratado de seguir un rumbo mejor para nuestra ciudad, porque obviamente tengo un vecino muy fortalecido como es Laredo, Texas. Estados Unidos, pues obviamente nos lleva a la delantera, pero nosotros siempre con un rumbo fijo, con una visión y tratando de fortalecer a esta región que tanto escuchan ustedes que somos la primera frontera de Latinoamérica, que somos la tercera aduana más importante de Estados Unidos y la primera de Latinoamérica, y que estamos buscando que las ciudades se reflejen al igual que como están las aduanas, que nos reconozcan como están las aduanas. Y hemos estado realizando un trabajo desde el mes de octubre y que le pusimos transformando la relación binacional. Les quiero hacer un poquito de recuerdo que en los términos, en el comercio exterior, como bien lo decíamos, somos la frontera más dinámica entre Estados Unidos y México. Nuestras operaciones aduaneras superan un monto de $1 millón por minuto. Así de grande son el tema del comercio en nuestras ciudades. La región de los dos Laredos es la zona metropolitana binacional más importante de Estados Unidos y México en materia económica, siendo el factor económico uno de los lazos más fuertes entre nosotros, sin dejar de lado nuestra historia, nuestra cultura y nuestro territorio. En el 2021, los dos Laredos fuimos seleccionados de entre todos los aglomerados urbanos binacionales del mundo como la sede del primer foro internacional de ONU Hábitat denominado Visión, en el que trazamos una hoja de ruta para alcanzar una mayor integración transfronteriza. En el 2022 logramos concretar la instalación del primer laboratorio a nivel mundial de ONU Hábitat en materia de gobernanza y gestión metropolitana binacional, el MetroLab, desde donde se está dando seguimiento a todos aquellos proyectos provenientes del sector público, social y privado que busquen un desarrollo sostenible en nuestra región. Como resultado de esta gran alianza de ONU Hábitat, firmamos una declaración metropolitana binacional junto a líderes y funcionarios federales de Estados Unidos y México, unificando una agenda de trabajo para consolidar una dinámica de hermandad, cooperación y colaboración entre nuestras ciudades. Aquí fue donde te conocimos afortunadamente. Y bueno, Nuevo Laredo, junto con Laredo, Texas, encontramos 12 puntos donde compartimos la misma agenda, que viene siendo el desarrollo económico, la competitividad, la planificación, la movilidad, proyectos estratégicos, medio ambiente, educación, salud, vivienda digna, seguridad, gobierno y resiliencia binacional. A través de esa eficiente gestión metropolitana que día con día la fortalecemos al estar siempre en comunicación, ya sea el alcalde Pitt y una servidora o todos los funcionarios municipales de ambas ciudades, donde hemos estado siempre de la mano para fortalecer a nuestras ciudades, encontramos en las acciones destacan las siguientes: la colaboración y cooperación institucional dentro del marco constitucional y legal de cada nación, desarrollar una misma visión transfronteriza para resolver con éxito nuestros desafíos, implementar iniciativas comunes en ambos lados de la frontera con el objeto de generar un impacto positivo social, económico y medioambiental, que ahí viene ahorita el tema que tanto nos emociona al alcalde y a una servidora, y procurar el intercambio de experiencias y buenas prácticas entre ambas ciudades. Quisimos buscar y estamos trabajando para ser ciudades inclusivas, a pesar de pertenecer a distintos países o regirnos por distintas leyes. Hemos acordado diseñar un plan urbano que nos permita impulsar un crecimiento paralelo para que nuestros habitantes puedan acceder plenamente y sin discriminación a las oportunidades sociales, económicas, culturales, políticas de nuestra región. Un tema importante y en el que nosotros estamos algo rezagados, pero que estamos trabajando para buscar ese bienestar para las familias, es la salud y la educación del lado mexicano, y estamos buscando mejorar la atención médica en ambos lados de la frontera, así como impulsar la movilidad educativa binacional. Gracias a la hermandad con la ciudad de Laredo, Texas, aquí viene un tema muy importante que quisiera recalcar y agradecer al vecino país de Estados Unidos. La ciudad de Nuevo Laredo y Laredo, Texas, con esta relación binacional tan fuerte. Desde el mes de julio del 2021, yo todavía no tomaba protesta como alcaldesa, pero empezamos a tener acercamientos con Laredo, Texas, y empezamos a vacunar a todos nuestros habitantes de COVID. Saben que en México se tuvo un poquito más de problema en conseguir la vacuna, y a la fecha, al día de hoy, hemos vacunado a más de 110,000 bebés, niños, adultos, jóvenes con esta relación binacional. La verdad es que para nosotros ese es un tema muy importante porque, como siempre lo digo, muchas veces es dificilísimo ponerte de acuerdo en tu mismo país con las autoridades para sacar un proyecto. Imagínense que ahorita Estados Unidos dejó de lado sus protocolos, sus proyectos, sus cosas de seguridad, y nos permite a nosotros cruzar a su aduana, y obviamente con las medidas de seguridad que se requieren, y la gente no se baja de los autobuses. Pero como gobierno municipal hacemos toda la logística, y diariamente se estuvieron vacunando 1,500, 2,000, 2,500 personas en el lado americano en los puentes de Laredo, Texas. La gente no tenía que llevar ni visa. La gente nada más teníamos que tener el control y que el autobús cumpliera con los requisitos, que no se bajaran del autobús, que tuviera aire acondicionado y que tuviera baño. Hacíamos esa logística de 20 minutos, se subían las enfermeras y hasta la fecha siguen vacunando. Fuimos el primer municipio en todo el país de México en vacunar a nuestros adolescentes y obviamente a nuestros bebés, gracias a esa buena relación que formalmente empezamos a vacunar en Nuevo Laredo, a la par que Laredo, Texas, a los bebés de 6 meses en adelante. Entonces, pues, ¿cómo no voy a estar contenta? ¿Cómo no voy a estar agradecida con Estados Unidos, con esta relación tan importante, y que todos los días todos aportamos un granito de arena para que nuestras ciudades hermanas se fortalezcan? Y que, bueno, pues todos lo que buscamos siempre y siempre es a lo que vamos, es buscar una mejor calidad de vida. Y bueno, pues es temas importantísimos que nunca vamos a dejar de agradecer toda esta alianza tan fuerte que se ha hecho con Estados Unidos y México. Y bueno, la alianza entre las fronteras, para lograr un desarrollo sostenible. Hemos trabajado en la zona metropolitana, sabiendo que es imperativo continuar consolidando alianzas entre el sector público, social y privado de ambas ciudades. El agua limpia y el saneamiento, que aquí vienen nuestros amigos de NatBank. Recientemente hemos firmado un convenio de intención con dependencias federales e instituciones de financiamiento de Estados Unidos y México para la posible obtención de un importante crédito que nos permita costear diversos proyectos de ampliación y mejoramiento de los sistemas de alcantarillado y saneamiento de nuestra ciudad. Para Nuevo Laredo, pues tiene o tuvo unos colectores, porque ya te vas abajo de la tierra, abres y ya no hay colector, ya pasa directamente, está, como dirían los arquitectos, momificado, está la forma del colector, la tierra ya dura y muchas veces está pasando el agua directamente por abajo de la tierra. Es un tema que los gobiernos, como gobierno municipal, muchas veces no construyes o no lo haces, primeramente porque es un tema de mucho dinero, pero sobre todo porque es una obra que no se ve. Es una obra, es el dinero enterrado. Y bueno, pues los alcaldes siempre quieren dejar un legado y que los recuerdes, ¿verdad? Por alguna gran obra. Pero pues yo ya sabía del problema, obviamente estábamos ya muy involucrados y al escuchar a la gente y platicar con nuestros amigos de NatBank, pues no pudimos dejar de tema de lado y como gobierno municipal este año hemos invertido alrededor de, quiero decirles, 300 millones de pesos, que son alrededor de 16 millones de dólares en los colectores sanitarios para que las descargas al río Bravo pues ya no lleguen las aguas residuales en ese tema. Falta muchísimo por hacer, obviamente. Traemos un proyecto importante aquí con los amigos de NatBank porque nosotros queremos terminar con ese problema y darle esa vida que necesita a nuestro río Bravo y que como tanto nos han platicado ahorita con la sequía y con tantos temas, pues lo más importante es rescatar nuestra agua. En la economía y la infraestructura, los dos Laredos promovimos de manera permanente nuestra región para atraer nuevas inversiones y consolidarnos como un epicentro del comercio exterior. Asimismo, buscamos impulsar la economía invirtiendo como nunca antes en obra pública. Mi gobierno destinó tan solo en este año más de 1,300 millones de pesos para mejorar nuestra infraestructura y tecnología y fortalecer nuestra competitividad ante otras regiones del mundo. Como parte del desarrollo sostenible de nuestra zona metropolitana, estamos promoviendo junto a nuestros vecinos la construcción del Parque Binacional en el Río Bravo, proyecto que busca generar un impacto positivo, social, económico y cultural en nuestras fronteras, perseverando en todo momento el medio ambiente. Ahí está más o menos, aquí están los expertos como Rick, que es él y todo un equipo de Laredo, Texas y de Nuevo Laredo. Esta es la prueba más fehaciente de que estamos trabajando coordinadamente. Tenemos 9 meses trabajando en este proyecto. Agradecida por siempre con el embajador Ken Salazar, que fue el visionero, por llamarlo de alguna manera, el que nos ha impulsado, el que nos dijo, busquémoslo y hemos estado trabajando fuertemente ya con un proyecto, ya estuvimos en Washington, como nos lo platicaron hace ratito, estuvimos lunes y martes también en la Ciudad de México presentando nuestro proyecto, y ahí vamos empujándolos, buscando abrir las puertas, buscando hacer conciencia de lo importante que sería rescatar a nuestro Río Bravo. Y por diseñamos un plan maestro que además de estar en armonía con el entorno, ayudará a preservar y proteger el río Bravo, además que nos permitirá fortalecer el vínculo entre ambos lados de la frontera y ofrecer a la comunidad, así como los turistas, un espacio donde se promueva el intercambio comercial y cultural. El plan maestro está diseñado para preservar el entorno natural, fomentar el esparcimiento familiar, el intercambio cultural y la economía, principalmente a través del turismo. Para esto destacamos las siguientes áreas. Una zona comercial será un atractivo por su vista panorámica. Además, se plantea el uso de manzanas cerca del puente internacional como área para construir un centro comercial. También se contempla un área habitacional en la modalidad de departamentos, buscando que esta forma incentivar el turismo de la ciudad. Una zona monarca, mariposa monarca, que es un tema importante, se propone el aprovechamiento sustentable de una especie natural que propicie la cohesión a través del esparcimiento y actividades de educación ambiental en un entorno seguro, aprovechando la enorme riqueza biológica y cultural de la frontera. Un centro acuícola con la creación de un centro de investigación y reproducción de especies nativas del río Bravo, se busca lograr un equilibrio ecológico de la vegetación y fauna acuática mediante el sistema de la acuicultura. Esto también nos permitirá que la pesca tradicional y deportiva sea sustentable. Un circuito colosio que también lo necesitamos en nuestra ciudad. Proponemos adecuaciones y conexiones para formar un circuito vial con el propósito de agilizar los tiempos de traslado intraurbano de los ciudadanos. Todo lo anterior no sería posible, que este es un tema importante y también por lo que estamos aquí, sin antes brindar una solución integral a la problemática de las descargas de aguas residuales que llegan al río Bravo, por lo que invertimos este año, como bien les dije, más de 120 millones de pesos para reconstruir los colectores pluviales y 300 millones de pesos para los colectores de drenaje sanitario. Con estas acciones seguiremos siendo la zona metropolitana más fuerte, más unida y más próspera. Que la hermandad que existe entre Nuevo Laredo y Laredo sea un ejemplo claro de desarrollo sostenible para el mundo. Muchísimas gracias.
Muchas gracias, alcaldesa. Ya no voy a depender del micrófono y doy la palabra al alcalde Pete Sainz. Gracias.
Thank you very much. On behalf of our city, Laredo, and of course our sister city as well, Nuevo Laredo, thank you, John, and thank you all the participants here. It's important that you see two border cities come as one community. You know, truly we're sister cities. You know, the river some people say may divide us, but for us, it truly unites us. Carmen Lilia, gracias. I think she gave you a good indication as to what our cities are about and how we perform as brothers and sisters. We're known as that shiny port in the southwestern border, the Americas. By way of geography, we've been favored. We're the #1 land port. We're the #3 port overall in the U.S., which covers basically $350 billion worth of trade every year. The federal government, I may say, just from customs duties and fees that they collect from our port alone, is over $800 million a year. So if anyone's listening, I would say just invest a little more from those monies that you receive, that U.S. Treasury receives back into Port Laredo for projects such that are so important that you'll hear Mr. Archer present. And I don't want to take too much of my time because I do want to have Mr. Archer present this binational project that we had to conserve the river, restore the ecology for our border. But I do want to mention, and I want to go back and touch on what the ambassadors spoke about this morning, more particularly Ken Salazar. You know, don't you love Ken Salazar with his style? You know, he's kind of loose and but yet very specific as to what goals he wants. But he raised the issue, where are we? Who are we? Where are we going? And how do we structure this better relationship between Mexico and the U.S.? And I would say, look to Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. You know, we've been doing that for some time. And I'm sure there's other border communities as well that see themselves as regional, impactful communities that can do so much for our countries. And I'm glad that the border has been raised to that level where Washington, Mexico, and others see us with value. Before it seemed like the border was, well, it's there and it does provide a service and does have some value, but not to the value that we at the border feel that should be recognized. in other areas of importance, especially in Washington and Mexico City. But I think we've gotten there. Uh, uh, the ambassador Moctezuma did say that you really can't create something without imagining it. Well, we've imagined, we've we have a vision, and we're beginning to create that there at the border. And it begins with the river. The river truly has been ignored, uh, disrespected. It's been undignified by so many of us, including us. We basically gave our backs to the Rio Grande, backs to the source of life that has been providing for the entire communities that feed and actually take water from the Rio Grande. And it's been screaming and yelling, need help, help me. And and finally, that that voice, that scream, that yell is now being silenced by the drought in such a way as far as volumes, but yet raised the awareness that we truly have to conserve a river. You you saw you heard the other speakers talk about the seriousness of this drought. It is very serious. Both of us, Carmelilla and myself and others throughout the border have been discussing emergency plans as well. We're doing everything possible to conserve every drop of water now. It's truly front and center of how valuable this river is and how needed to conserve and restore the ecology, the basin, to provide as much as possible water to remain at the river. And the ambassador spoke about this need to remove these invasive species. Salt cedar is one of them. Carrizo cane is another one that actually draw so much water through transpiration, and there's tremendous losses of water that should be going to agriculture, should be going to the populace, us, the human beings. But yet we've discarded this river and its ecology for so long now that it's calling for help, and help is arriving. And then the ambassador says, what structure can we give it? How can we bring this awareness now? Well, obviously the river has said, help me now, and I think we're listening now because we had no other choice. But I would say, this prototype that we developed with the ambassador, and I thank him so much because he's raised his awareness of how to be neighborly, not in a be neighborly. Well, yeah, let me say this: be neighborly in a better, nicer way of approaching two nations, where border security can also be attained. And and I say, do what we've done, what he started, and Ambassador Montezuma started, and that's using the general consul vehicles, the ambassadors, the general consuls. They organized this. They brought us together. They've been behind the ambassador, formalizing, creating meetings for what we're doing there locally or regionally in Laredo. And we've developed a plan that you'll see Mr. Archer and his architectural company that have developed so beautifully, but it lacks money. And the locals can only provide so much because this is a very ambitious program or that we have, a project that we have, and it requires ambitious funding. And the local purses can only go so far. And this is why we're asking the private sector, and I think Ambassador Moctezuma is very clear and very poignant as to private sector, you all need to get involved, and I would echo the same sentiment as well. And also the federal government as well. We're willing to participate and do our part, but yet we need federal monies. If and I may sometimes criticize if our prior president was able to find funding for his project, this wall project. I challenge the Biden administration, which I've been challenging, find the money to do this virtual wall and preserve our river as well. If one president can find it, I would say this president can also find it. And we need that kind of money. We need that kind of impetus and attention there at the border. And this project that we have in mind not only restores the ecology and focuses on the quality of the water and also the volume, because by doing what we need to do, it's going to create more volume for a longer period of time for us to benefit from. But it also secures the border. And we've been, at least our community there, feel that through a virtual wall, which is basically removing these invasive species, more openness for our authorities to actually detect and alert and come to the aid of the border. That is also provided in this plan that we have. And of course, we need manpower. We need resources. We need personnel and technology, as Ambassador Salazar mentioned to us as well. Those are the virtual elements that we can do. And let us show the border of the world that through a virtual wall approach, border security can be secured, and it can be achieved. But allow us, let's put that prototype into play here, and we'll show the effectiveness of it. And I know there's room for other structures and this and that, but at least in our area, let us try this virtual wall approach as explained and further described in a pamphlet or not a book, but a pamphlet, I think, that Dennis Nixon prepared as a common sense approach to border security. So anyway, we have so many facets and so many things here at the border, and I would like for you to, but I also do want to mention and go back to, because I see some principles here. Laredo is successful in commerce, not because of governments, which we do play a role, but because of the private sector. The World Trade Bridge, huge in terms of commerce, but it's because of the private sector there in the Laredo area, have perfected trade, have perfected commerce, warehousing, transportation. Thank goodness for the TxDOT people that through their representation and the Mexican representation as well, we have developed and produced a Texas-Mexico border, transportation plan, which is already there. It's a matter of just effectuating. But the bottom line is money. The roadmap is there as to how many bridges and what roads connect to these bridges and how efficiency commerce can move through our bridges. And this is why we're expanding the World Trade Bridge to accommodate more trade. These supply chains that we talk about that become such an issue. We want those supply chains and products, goods moving as quickly as possible from Mexico into the U.S. and vice versa. And we're also planning a 4-5 bridge, and I see some of the principles here too. It's a private endeavor that has a lot of meaning there for the entire southwestern border here, more so there in the Laredo area and the Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas area as well. So anyway, we have so much to offer. We're short on time, and I want to at least yield whatever little time I've got left to Rich Archer. I think you'll enjoy his presentation. It's somewhat extremely unique, and could serve as a prototype for the entire border that with the challenges that is currently facing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. If I could get the presentation up. Thank you. So the ambassador introduced lightly this notion of a binational river conservation project. The two mayors have spoken about it. We've heard a lot this morning about a river in crisis. We have an endangered river, and we have two communities that are also sharing in that crisis. What's remarkable about this project is that these two communities have come together across international boundaries, encouraged by the ambassadors, led by two mayors who put this ahead of politics, and empowered by IBC Bank, NAD Bank, Kansas City Southern, local businesses who've come alongside to make sure that this truly binational opportunity is realized. What I've learned from this is that this binational project, which is going to have an influence of the world, is also hyper-local. It's happening because people like these leaders, like these business leaders, have come together along with our design partners from Able City, Frank Radnowski and Viviana Frank, who have been extraordinarily on the ground in Laredo, understanding the issues that their city faces, collaborating with our architect friends in Nuevo Laredo, Carlos de Anda y Ignacio Quiñones. This is a design that's been brought together across nations. And that's part of the beauty of it, is the process itself is as important as the thing that we're creating. And our architect, Barbara Warren, was born in Matamoros and lives in San Antonio, and she is a representation of this binational relationship. So in the next slide, we have a 6.2 mile vision that encompasses, or 10 kilometers, that encompasses over 1,000 acres on both sides of the river. To put that in context, I'm from San Antonio. Our river here includes 800 acres. This is larger than the San Antonio River from its top to bottom, if we include the acreage. It's divided into three sectors. The northwest is a natural sector, comes into the middle of the city, and there's an urban core, and then to the east and south is a recreational zone. But what's been critical about this is that while you may be asking, why in Laredo? Why Nuevo Laredo? There was a point in history where these two communities were actually a nation. It was called the Republic of the Rio Grande. But with the stroke of a pen in the treaty, it was separated into two different nations. And yet, for its many, many centuries of history together, it has been one community. It's been one culture. It's been one community centered on the river. And so we're creating a future here, a conservation project which is unified, that is done together, juntos. There are really 5 significant themes around this. And you've heard them mentioned today, and I think these themes are really important as we think about the future of the border. The first and the most important is conservation of the river. We do have a water problem. This is the sole drinking source for 6 million people on both sides of the border, and it is threatened. Number 2, it is about securing the border for both nations. It's about having equality in the way we think about security and safety on the border. And we do that by bringing activity, eyes on the river, making the river the center of life again rather than turning our back to it. It's about stimulating the economy. These two communities are inextricably linked economically. And yet, with the border shutting down, we've seen both economies desperately in need of help and in need of one another. This is about restoring that economic connection and celebrating the shared culture. On both sides of the border are people from the same family, from the same community who have now been separated. This is about returning that and celebrating the culture that we have on the border. And then finally, this park, a model of its kind, the first in the world, will be a symbol to the world of how nations can be neighbors. So in the next slide, you'll see the current condition. And this is indeed a tale of two cities. On the right side, you see Nuevo Laredo. The river is really inaccessible. Invasive species have largely taken over, and it has been untended. It's been neglected. On the US side, on the left, it's been abused. There's no plant life left. The silty soil is eroding into the river, and it's reducing the depth of the river by widening the river as it comes through Laredo. Between the two dams, we're already losing about 25% of the water to evaporation. When we reduce the depth of the river, that's only increased. This is water that's being lost to communities that need it. Secondly, the Carrizo cane and the salt cedar that the mayor spoke about. The Carrizo cane, 1 cubic meter of that consumes 30 gallons a day. One person requires 60 gallons a day. So 2 cubic meters of this cane is drinking what one person needs in a day. One salt cedar, 200 gallons. That would almost serve a family of 4 in Nuevo Laredo. We've got to deal with the invasive species. We need to deal with the erosion. We need to think differently about these conditions, which are less than ideal on both sides. On the Nuevo Laredo side, they've been dumping as many as 10 millions of gallons of sewage into the river every day. This is the same river that's providing the sole source of drinking water for 6 million people. That's not acceptable. This is a vision for changing that. It's for thinking differently. It's about moving from turning our backs on the river to turning toward the river. And this is our vision. The next slide, please. Imagine in the center between these two communities, along the banks of the Rio Grande, a place that is green and prosperous, which is the theme of this gathering. Imagine clean water. Nuevo Laredo has committed to fix their sewage problem. That's job one to create this conservation project. But it's also about removing invasive species, creating nature trails, recreational centers, monarch sanctuaries. They were just added to the endangered species list, if you don't know that. That is a huge problem if we lose our monarch butterflies. They're America's pollinators. They're Latin America's pollinators. And at the heart of the whole thing, a binational amphitheater, a place where communities from both nations can gather and enjoy a shared celebration. But this project even goes a step further. In the next slide, you'll see a vision for how we might actually embrace one another. How the bridge, rather than being a divider, could become un gran abrazo between the two nations. Imagine a place where the park extended up and over the bridge from both sides and connected. Imagine a place where people from both sides of the river could gather without having to pay a toll, without having to have documentation, to be reunited with their family, to be reunited with their friends, to have weddings, quinceañeras, marketplaces in a shared binational space. This is the vision that these two communities have developed together and that we've had the privilege of being a part of with them. And this is the vision that the ambassadors have for every community along the Rio Grande and between the border from Tijuana to Brownsville. We need every one of you to be a part of that to make this happen. It's an incredibly exciting opportunity. The greatest problems we have in the world today are border problems. The greatest problems we're going to have in the future are going to be around water. Those two things come together here in Laredo and Nuevo Laredo. And these communities are showing us how we can do this differently. As the mayor said, this is a very expensive project. What is the cost of not doing it? Thank you.
I'd like to be able to say we can take a lot of questions here, but I think in the interest of fairness to all our other panelists, as well as at some point we are going to want to break for lunch. I just want to thank Alcaldesa, Mayor, and Rick, architect. I'll use their titles, but Carmen Lilia, Mayor Pete, and Rick for sharing their experience, sharing their leadership, sharing their creativity. And I hope the mayor, both ambassadors hear some of this. I know they've heard it before, but I think this is what they're driving at when we got our homework earlier in the morning on what are the new ideas we need to bring. I think this is an excellent example. It's one we were very eager to share with everyone here. We hope it stimulates some creativity in all dimensions of the border work and the binational work you all are doing. So thanks again for sharing that with us. And with that, I'll gladly let Jesse give me the hook.
Gracias.
Next, I'd like to call Calixto Mateos, Managing Director, back up here to moderate the next panel. I'd also like to call Colleen Clemenson from Sandag y Rogelio Rivero, por favor.
Okay, thank you, Jesse. I'm very glad that you're able now to see what we plan on this is to also highlight the great work we can do together. And as you've seen, it's through water that's a big issue, through the combination of something that's gonna take care of the river on both sides, and now we're gonna have another example, let's say, about how we can work together also in the crosses. I mean, all these projects are common in all the cities of the border. We're highlighting each city with a different project, but it's really important. And in this case, I would like to focus on how binational collaboration is helping shape mobility between San Diego and Tijuana, a region that is a leader in technology, innovation, and now mobility with several interesting projects in development. Our first panelist is Colleen Clemenson, who serves as the Deputy CEO for the San Diego Association of Governments, SANDAG. She has more than 20 years of experience in public sector land use and transportation planning in the San Diego region. She manages 70 active projects and programs and focuses on increasing community engagement. Before Mrs. Clemenson became its co-CEO, she previously served as the principal regional planner with SANDAG, concentrating on connecting local land use plans with regional transportation investment. In addition, she has extensive experience in public involvement through the preparation and implementation of several large-scale, long-range planning and policy documents and smaller-scale neighborhood revitalization plans. Ahora quisiera también presentarles a Rogelio Rivera, quien es el Director General de Desarrollo Carretero de la Secretaría de Infraestructura, Comunicaciones y Transportes. Rogelio es un ya viejo amigo, y es un economista con maestría en Administración y Dirección de Empresas y más de 10 años de experiencia en análisis económico. Rogelio tiene una carrera muy distinguida en el gobierno mexicano. Antes de formar parte de la SICT, trabajó en el Instituto Mexicano del Seguro Social, en la Secretaría de Hacienda y Crédito Público y en la Secretaría de Salud del Gobierno de México. Él ha participado en el diseño, ejecución y seguimiento de diversos esquemas para el desarrollo de infraestructura social y económica, tanto de carácter público como de carácter privado. So please join me in a round of applause for the panelists. Just in the spirit of trying to shorten time, I would throw some questions, but then you do presentation, try to address those. And so we can go first with the questions, and then I'll say. Questions: when planning transportation projects, how do you estimate for your binational neighbor and their population? That's one. As we read recently, more San Diegans are moving to Tijuana to live but continue to work in San Diego. How has this truly binational population impacted your planning. And the Cali-Baja region continues to stand out as the leader. We have CBX, Otay Mesa East, San Diego Climate Action Plan, Tijuana Innovadora, just to name a few. What are the next set of innovation projects coming to the Baja Cali region? So let's proceed. Colleen, would you make your presentation first, and then Rogelio?
So thank you so much, Callisto and John and Jesse, and such a pleasure to be here with the ambassador and be here in person from San Diego and meet so many of you that I've never had the opportunity to meet before. So thank you. And we're so happy to share the San Diego story, but we also have so much to learn from all of you and really learning from the two Laredos as well. So I really appreciate whoever is going through the slides. When we think of the San Diego region, it's not just the border, our entire region is a border region. And if you go to the next slide, we are working on a transformational transportation plan. And go to the next slide, what we're really talking about here are achieving three things that are absolutely in alignment with what everyone's been talking about here at NADBank. We're trying to address traffic congestion. Transportation has divided communities for years. We need to figure out how we use transportation to bring people together. Addressing social equity in a meaningful way. Transportation is the way for upward mobility, connecting people, not dividing us. And then last, meeting our state and federal mandates. And that's all about the environmental goals, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, reducing vehicle miles traveled, reducing the amount of time that cars are idling, and moving toward a cleaner transportation system. So this really lays the groundwork for, just a greener future for all of us. The way we approach this, if you go to the next slide, is use data to help drive our decision making. So really looking at where are the highest concentrations of people living in the San Diego region, where are they working, what are the travel patterns, and what are the most innovative transportation solutions to the trips that people are making in the region. And with that data, with the next slide, we applied what we call 5 big moves. So the first thing is technology, make the most of the system that we have today and make it work better utilizing technology. So that's managing the system, whether it's through pricing or time of day pricing, all of that coming together. Prioritizing certain lanes on our roadways for certain types of vehicles, certain times of day, depending upon the demand. That even happens at the border crossings as well. Really taking public transit to the next level, speeding it up so that we have transportation that's going 80, 90, 100 miles an hour. That's when it becomes competitive with driving. That's our transit leap. Complete corridors is really thinking about utilizing our corridors for all sorts of transportation needs. Mobility hubs, that's the land use piece. Where are the hubs of activity? And then how do we connect those with the transportation system? And flexible fleets are really the shared, autonomous, clean vehicles that help us get around our communities and connect us to higher speed transit. When you go to the next slide, we'll just go through a number of layers here, but this is how it looks in the San Diego region, and this needs to be deployed across the border. And when I say borders, it's not just the international border, it's with our neighboring counties. And it's really thinking, starting with the land use, where's the concentration of land use? Then the first layer we put on with the next click are the flexible fleets. This is how we get around. If you can press one more time here. There we go. The flexible fleets. So these are the vehicles that are shared that help us get around our communities and to transit. The next click is taking our highway system and converting many of the existing single purpose lanes to make those high occupancy vehicle lanes, tolled lanes, what we call managed lanes. Then with the next click, running a rapid bus system on all of those lanes, speeding up our light rail system. And this is really just where we start to grade separate, where we have trolleys that are waiting in the same traffic with cars, just separating that. Right now, if we go from the border at San Ysidro into downtown San Diego, it takes an hour. With just a few grade separations, probably 8 of them getting into downtown, it goes down to 25 minutes. That's when it becomes a truly compelling option for people, reducing that time to get to jobs. And then the final is adding in the high-speed commuter rail. I want to go through just a few projects that we have underway. There's been a lot of talk, if you go to the next slide, on the new port of entry. Very excited about this. We're getting really close to being able to deliver the project. We did the groundbreaking just this week. We now are very close to having a revenue sharing agreement with Mexico so that we can actually fund the ongoing operations of the facility. And we invite any of you who are interested to come see us. We'd love to give you a tour of this facility. I think if you go to the next slide, some of the things we're really trying to do that get to connections, and I think this is maybe getting to Ambassador Salazar's question, are we being as green as possible in these kinds of investments? And so one of the things that we're looking at, I think many of you are aware of the CBX, so the crossing that can be done by foot to get to Tijuana International Airport. What we're looking at is a high-speed commuter rail connection from that facility up to San Diego International Airport. That would, again, be like a 20-minute connection. And with the two smaller airports, it really becomes like a much more connected major facility. Next are really, what we've done is gone out to the private sector and are asking, like, how can we be more innovative? We're so stuck in our ways, the way we've always delivered transportation. What are the new innovative ideas? And we had 18 concepts come in, 3 that we've narrowed it down to. One of them is with BEEP. And so we're looking to deploy with BEEP this is kind of the first set of flexible fleets and looking for specific communities that we can test this out in the San Diego region. These are vehicles that would then be sponsored by local businesses. So they'd be free to people who want to use them to maybe, if you want to travel a mile from where you are to go out for lunch or something like that. This is how this would be an example of the flexible fleets. The next example is with CAVNU, and they're proposing a specific kind of technology to help us manage the transportation system. So we're going to look at where we can pilot this in the region. And the third and probably most exciting is a potential partnership with Cordoba Corporation to do what we're looking at is a cross-border trolley. So this would actually be a public-private partnership to take the trolley that ends in San Ysidro and take that all the way into Tijuana, Rosarito, and make that connection so that people are no longer having to wait in traffic at our border crossings. Just to kind of wrap up, and I think this question came up about this sort of, this binational arrangement in the San Diego region, and Hector Venegas, who's with me here from Sandag, has been tracking a lot of data. And pre-pandemic, there were 160,000 people crossing the border between Tijuana and San Diego daily. After the pandemic, 140,000 people. So really what we're talking about are, U.S. citizens who are crossing the border from Tijuana on a daily basis as residents, as workers. And so we really, truly are a binational region. If you go to the next slide, as we talk about the system, it's about connecting people to where we need to go, to each other, to our culture, and we really are a binational region. And I just wanted to wrap up by saying I really appreciated the words that our mayor of San Diego said at the groundbreaking the other day. And he said, the border has been seen in our region as an area of conflict. And he said, but today it's an area of collaboration. And so I would hope to see us become what we're seeing with the 2 Laredos. Lots of exciting things happening. And I think what Ambassador Salazar said too is like, what is the forum that helps us all work together and pull all these ideas together? So thank you very much for inviting me here today. Really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, now, Rogelio, if you want to, please.
Creo que tengo una presentación. Sí. Bueno, pues muy buenos días. Antes que nada, un saludo de parte del ingeniero Jorge Arganis, secretario de Infraestructura, Comunicaciones y Transportes. Muchas gracias por volver a invitarnos. Tenemos muchos resultados que darles a partir del desarrollo que se ha llevado a cabo de la frontera en el último año y cómo estamos avanzando en cada uno de los proyectos que tenemos en nuestra frontera. No sé si tengan la presentación, si no la voy comentando aquí. Erika, pero aquí la tengo. No, permítanme, tengo una versión impresa. Bueno, realmente de la frontera norte podríamos, y me gustaría recalcar lo que bien nos comentan de parte de SANDAG, sobre Mesa de Otay, el cruce fronterizo que tenemos más importante en común con los Estados Unidos. Mesa de Otay, a diferencia de hace un año, ya tenemos un proyecto ejecutivo de la vialidad de acceso, ya lo tenemos totalmente liberado, un proyecto ejecutivo del proyecto fronterizo que está llevando a cabo, terminando de elaborar la Agencia Nacional de Aduanas. Asimismo, ya tenemos un 90% del derecho de vía liberado para la troncal y un 40% en el recinto fiscal, y ya una homologación binacional de parte para los ITS para asegurar los 20 minutos de tránsito a la frontera, y de igual forma para la compartición de los ingresos excedentes. En el estado de Sonora tenemos ya como propuesta no solicitada el cruce internacional de Agua Prieta Douglas 2, donde ya estamos a punto de liberar el dictamen de procedencia de la propuesta no solicitada. Este dictamen de procedencia no es otra cosa que el diligence que hace el propio gobierno mexicano para ser la contraparte del eventual permiso presidencial del lado americano. Nosotros también en este caso, en este proyecto de Agua Prieta Douglas, es un proyecto que no compromete fiscalmente al gobierno, que se paga con el propio flujo de la concesión a cambio del título de concesión. En Chihuahua, a fin de lograr una mayor competitividad en el estado, estamos ya también liberando el cruce fronterizo de San Jerónimo Santa Teresa. Es un cruce fronterizo que incluso viene a darle más a darle más bancabilidad al libramiento de Ciudad Juárez, que también estamos elaborando bajo el esquema de concesiones. Este cruce tiene una capacidad de una inversión de 700 millones de pesos. Es una construcción de un tramo de casi 20 kilómetros en la MEX 2 hasta la frontera, y también es un proyecto totalmente autofinanciable por parte de la iniciativa privada a través de la propuesta no solicitada. Caso de Tamaulipas, tenemos ya el puente internacional Laredo-4-5, es el proyecto también, igual que Mesa de Otay, de mayor relevancia para el gobierno de México en términos de la frontera, porque es un proyecto que totalmente resulta autofinanciable, un proyecto que ya tiene el dictamen de procedencia, proyecto que hemos logrado que evadir ahí uno de los mayores riesgos que tenemos, que es el asunto de la liberación del derecho de vía. Está totalmente liberado en ambos lados de la frontera. Es un proyecto que no va a comprometer recursos fiscales en lo absoluto, y que ya tiene, como repito, este dictamen de procedencia de parte del gobierno mexicano. Estamos ya se ingresó el expediente para el permiso presidencial en los Estados Unidos, ya estamos por lograrlo. Y finalmente, pues un proyecto que, como mencionaba el señor embajador, producto de las gestiones con el diálogo económico de alto nivel, ¿no? Pues vaya, es un proyecto que va a cambiar relativamente a la frontera. E igualmente platicábamos con la señora presidenta municipal de Laredo el asunto también de los otros proyectos adyacentes como Laredo 3, Laredo 1, Laredo 2, las modificaciones, la propia apertura, la propia conservación incluso de las federales que concurren hacia los puentes de la zona de Laredo. Hemos también tenido estas últimas semanas ya el logro de haber desdoblado, haber modificado el título de concesión del puente internacional Reynosa-FAR. Este puente igualmente con el concesionario Fonadín se logra que a partir de ampliarles el título de concesión se pueda monetizar ese plazo en pro de construir un nuevo cuerpo. Se va a construir un nuevo cuerpo de 4 carriles que obviamente dada la problemática y la congestión que conlleva este puente, pues generará toda una derrama económica y generará una nueva mayor virtuosidad en el tema del comercio internacional. Se va a construir este segundo cuerpo, se financia netamente también por el propio flujo de la concesión. No hay gran impacto ni de derecho de vía ni de impacto ambiental. Lo hemos trabajado también coordinadamente con la Comisión Internacional de Aguas, tanto de Estados Unidos como de México, a fin de lograr los permisos ambientales y lograr que estos proyectos tengan, pues tengan también ese sentido eco-friendly. Igualmente, en la parte de Tamaulipas, tenemos el proyecto de Ansaldúas, donde estamos buscando, también con el apoyo del señor embajador, buscando la forma de lograr mayor, tanto un mejor performance de la parte mexicana, como también de que tengamos ahí un complemento a la inversión por parte de la Agencia Nacional de Aduanas, a fin de lograr construir los carriles de carga que hacen falta. Tenemos el puente internacional de Río Bravodona, donde también estamos en la parte de la propuesta no solicitada con una inversión de 400 millones de pesos. Estamos concluyendo este dictamen de procedencia a fin de darle al promotor esta ya garantía de que el proyecto es bancable. Y así tenemos varios proyectos en la frontera. Tenemos también los proyectos que hemos platicado con NatBank de Roma, tenemos el proyecto de Mission en Texas, tenemos ya otro proyecto, no viene en la presentación, pero que ya iniciamos ejecución el año pasado, que es el Broadway Matamoros. Y bueno, prácticamente, yo quisiera comentar también los proyectos que tenemos con el banco. Aparte de estos proyectos financiadores, tenemos la gran participación del banco prevista para el Mesa de Otay, que es que funja como nuestro fiduciario, y de esta forma, al ser bilateral, pues tengamos un fiduciario común de confianza para ambos países, y que fuera el NatBank. Ya lo hemos trabajado con Sanda, lo hemos trabajado con Caltrans, y en estas mesas binacionales que tenemos en común. Pues esto sería el resumen de la frontera. Qué lástima que no pudimos presentar la presentación, pero cuentan con ella a través del director Calixto. Muchas gracias.
¿Cómo andamos de tiempo, Jesse? 3 minutos. No, we don't have time. No, bueno, muchas gracias. Thank you, Colleen. Muchas gracias, Rogelio. Realmente, como ven, es una frontera muy dinámica. Hay mucho que hacer y el banco está trabajando para también contribuir a estos cruces, que es parte de lo que hace que nuestras cadenas de valor se integren, y a la hora que lo hacemos más eficiente se consume menos energía, se consume menos agua, y también se contribuye a combatir el incremento en precios de una manera. Bueno, lo dejamos por ahora. Jesse, por favor.
Muchas gracias. Another round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.